Going to secondary school is a new season of life for every child. They all have their vision of how the transition from primary to secondary should be. New friends, all grown up, and having some independence from parents are all some of the aspects that interest these young fresh starters. In this child's vision of her assimilation into secondary school, the future was bright, and all would go just the way she wanted, until she met one of her new teachers. This teacher had her expectations of how a student should conduct oneself in the classroom and the impact and influence they should have on the learning of others. These boundaries were clear, and this new student was having difficulty adhering to them. At first, the teacher warned her gently. She had restorative conversations with the student about her conduct and reinforced the expectations. This student was certain nothing needed to change and that things would be fine the way they were. She was confident the problem was with the teacher and not with her. On the other hand, the teacher was certain this behavior would not just set the student back, but over time would impact negatively on the quality of learning for the others. It was clear the student and the teacher were not seeing eye to eye. Restorative conversations had short-term effect. Detentions had little to no impact. The measures of removal from the lesson, though beneficial for the teaching group, was not helpful for the student. With all strategies evaluated, the teacher decided to get the parents involved. She would talk to the student's mother to make her aware of the behaviors the child presented with in lessons, the impact on the child's and the class's learning, in the hope that this would bring some sense of sustained impact. This too was of no effect. Eventually, the parents started to make her conclusions of the situation very clear. She indicated that this teacher was the only one of all the child's teachers who was calling her and complaining about her child. The teacher then implemented the department student-teacher contract with clearly outlined objectives for both student and teacher. This worked for the first 2 weeks. The review was positive, and the teacher was delighted the problem would be behind them. The contract carried on for another 2 weeks, at which point it became clear the child was not making the same level of effort to comply. The teacher had discussed the measures with the head of year or the cohort pastoral lead to get advice as to what other strategies are being used elsewhere that is yielding success. The advice was to continue the initiative being employed. On the second reporting of the contract, the news was less positive, and this made the parent unhappy and dissatisfied. The next lesson, the child's behavior was at the worst it had ever been for the past 4 weeks. The teacher detained the child after school and followed up with a phone call to the parent. The parent was even more dissatisfied with the teacher at this point. "Clearly you have a vendetta against my child," she accused. "A vendetta?" the teacher questioned. Certainly they were not in agreement. The teacher later discovered that the parent reported her to the head of year and requested her child be removed from the teacher's class. For a moment, the teacher questioned her approach to the child's conduct. Could she really be acting towards the child with some hidden motive or agenda? If so, what really could it be and why? Unable to answer those questions, she checked the behavior log portal. Several other teachers had logged various behavioral concerns about the student. She was relieved that the problems she was having with the student was not unique to her classroom. She knew she treated all her students fairly. She certainly was not putting undue pressure on this child. The head of year addressed the complaints as he would any other. He collected information in a round robin and arranged a meeting with the parent, the child, the teacher, and himself. The teacher was unaware of what would transpire in the meeting, but she was confident she had conformed to professional standards. The head of year collected the parent from the reception and arrived at the meeting room where the teacher and student were waiting. He explained what had taken place to address the parent's complaint and provided her with copies of teachers' feedback. After she read them, he supplied her with some of the behavior logs that teachers had made. As she read the contents, her expression started to change. It was clear her child's behavior was not unique to this teacher's classroom. It was a rude awakening. It was time for some accountability and taking responsibility for the behavior of her child or the lack thereof. The head of year explained to her that the teacher did not have a vendetta against her child, and from the statements and behavior logs, it is clear this behavior is evident in other classrooms. Nevertheless, it is this teacher that is invested enough in the child's welfare to implement measures to correct it. She should be thanked and not vilified. Those words left the parent speechless. The person she thought was her greatest enemy was actually her best ally. Only she didn't recognize it until all the pieces of information were brought to bear.